All right, so welcome everybody. This is a webinar on using Stonefield Query Enterprise, which is our web version of Stonefield Query. So I'm going to spend about the first 15 minutes going through Stonefield Query Studio, showing you the differences between this and the desktop version, and then we'll spend the other 45 minutes going through Stonefield Query Web, which is the web front end for our report designer. So this is Stonefield Query Studio. You'll notice it looks very similar to the desktop version of Stonefield Query Studio, but there are a few differences that I'll point out. For one thing, at the database level, we have a new control here called connection type. The choices are use default connection, which means that whatever connection setting is here, which is used to refresh the data dictionary or read the data dictionary structure, would also be used by the report designer to connect when running reports. Another choice here is share connection, which is disabled right now, but it would be enabled if I had more than one database. And this is used if you have more than one database on the same server, and really the only difference in the connection setting would be the database name. In that case, you can choose share connection and then choose the database to share the connection with. The third choice is user can choose DSN. This is similar to the turning on the user can manage data sources option in the desktop version. It allows the user to choose which DSN they want to connect to when they run a report. And the last one is scripted, which is similar to clicking on the create get data sources script in our desktop version, except as I'll talk about in a couple of minutes, there is no scripting in the enterprise version of Stonefield Query Studio. There's plugins, and we'll get to that. But this simply means that you'll write some code that tells Stonefield Query what the connection settings are for this database. Another option here is active. If this is turned on, then the database is available to the report designer. If it's turned off, then it's not. At the table level, but the only difference here is do not refresh. If you turn this on, then this table will not be refreshed when the database is refreshed, or the data dictionary is being refreshed from the database. At the field level, there are quite a few changes. One of the changes here is the data types are .NET data types. So we have things like Boolean and datetime, double, string, and so on. And another change is that we no longer care about the size of the field. So you don't see controls for width and for decimals anymore. Those things are kind of immaterial from a reporting perspective. There is a new choice here, content type. Normal means that Stonefield Query will simply output the value of the field onto a report. HTML and RTF mean that Stonefield Query, that this field contains formatted information, either in HTML format or in rich text format. And in that case, Stonefield Query will actually output the formatted text to the report, which is something nice. We didn't support that in our older version. We had a way to strip the HTML or RTF codes out, so you just had the raw text. This will actually display it as formatted text. Image means that this field contains an image. Image path means that it contains a path to an image. In either case, choosing one of these two, when you run this, when you output this field to a report, it'll actually output the image for that particular field. The format control, we only have one control now instead of we had under the desktop version we have picture and format controls. Now there's just a single format control. It's a box. You can type something if you want to, but if we take a look, for example, at a numeric field like let's try the freight field here, or total price. In that case, as a numeric field, there's a predefined drop-down set of values. So, for example, C2 means currency with 2 decimal places. Some of these are similar, but they don't have a currency symbol, for example, or no decimal places or percents and so on. You don't have to use one of these drop-down values. You can type in your format if you want to. Dates have something similar. If we take a look at, say, the order date field, it also has a drop-down list, but the drop-down list is different types of date formats, whether you want the date only or the date time and so on. Default summary, this is used to define or tell Stonefield Query what the default summary should be for this field. It's set to none for most fields, but if you want to change it to sum or count or average, then that will be the default summary type used when this field is added to a report. We used to have a similar, or we do have a similar feature to this in the desktop version, but it was kind of an all or none thing. Either all numeric fields are automatically summed when added to a report, or none of them are, whereas now this allows you to control on a field-by-field basis whether they're summed or not. The rest of the things in this page are the same as they are in the desktop version. On the calc page, there's a number of differences here. Let's look at a calculated field first. So this kind of looks like the desktop version does. You can indicate whether this is an expression that is sent to the database or whether Stonefield Query will process it. There is an expression builder, so you can choose from the list of tables and fields. One thing that's different, though, is first of all, over at the right here, the list of built-in functions. These are a new set of functions, obviously. Although what we've done is reproduced a lot of the functions we had in our older version, or in our desktop version, rewritten them as .NET functions so that they would be available in any existing expressions you already had. We've also added a bunch of new functions in here that in some cases duplicate the functions we already had, but they use the names, the same names of similar functions in Excel. So because a lot of people are familiar with Excel functions like eDate, for example, or now, or things like that. So we've added functions that have those Excel function names, so they would be available here as well. Also, under the plugin functions, we'll talk about plugins in a couple minutes, but you can write your own custom functions. So, like in the desktop version, where you can create a user-defined script and put some code in there, and then call that from the output expression of a field. You can do the same thing here. It's just that you write it in a different language, and you write it in what we call a plugin. And like I said, I'll talk about plugins in a little more detail. But the nice thing about this is that Stonefield Query automatically recognizes any user-defined functions you've already written and displays them in the drop-down list, and in fact even shows the signature for them as well. So that's for a calculated field. For a normal field, the list looks quite different now, though. We have a concept called a value converter. The idea is, suppose you have a field in your database that contains information in one way, but you want the user to see it in a different way. In the desktop version, you can deal with that by creating some kind of function that converts the value from the way it's stored to the way it's displayed to the user. In the enterprise version, it's actually easier now. You create what's called a value converter, which is just a little bit of .NET code that converts a value from the database to the way the user wants to see it, and from the way the user types it in for a filter condition back to the way it's stored in the database. So really, it's just two methods in the class: convert and convert from. We have a bunch of built-in value converters. For example, in the Sage 300, also formerly known as ACPAC, is an accounting system, and it stores numeric values or date values as numeric values. So today's date would be stored as 2014-0520, that numeric value. The problem, of course, the user expects to see it as a date value, and so we created a value converter, numeric to date value converter, that takes a numeric value, converts it to a date, or when they filter on, order date is May 20th, 2014, we'll convert that back into numeric value to send it to the database for the where clause. And we've got some other value converters here, converting a string to numeric value, converting the letters T or F to a Boolean, or the letters Y or N to a Boolean. So if you've got a field that contains a string, T, F, Y, N, you can convert it to a Boolean value. And you can write your own value converters, as I said. This down here is not used very often, but if for some reason your value converter needs additional metadata about this particular field, you can put it in here, and it could be any format you want. It could be straight text or XML, or because we don't care. It's something that your value converter would grab the value of this and then do something with it. The other option here is values method. Similar to a feature that we have in the desktop version, where you can control how the data is displayed to the user when they click the values button. Special page is the same as it was in the desktop version, so I won't go over that in any more detail. For relations, there really aren't a lot of changes here other than one thing, and that is the join type. Rather than showing inner join, right outer, and left outer, we had a lot of people who were confused about what right outer and left outer were. Not that they don't understand SQL, but a right outer statement is fine, but you have to know which side of the SQL statement we put the child table and the parent table. And if you didn't know that, then you had a hard time figuring out whether to use right outer or left outer. So now we've just changed the wording to favor child and favor parent to make it more obvious which one is going to be pulling more records from, the child or the parent. Normally you choose favor parent, but you can choose something else if you want to. All right, a few of the differences in Studio. One is that we have a new concept here called join trees. A join tree allows you to define an exact path between two tables that are not directly related, like say customers and products. Well, you have to go from customers to orders to order details to products. And normally, Stonefield Query would build a join that way, but in some complex environments like the Sage 300 accounting system I mentioned earlier, there are multiple paths to get from table A to table D, and not all of those are correct. You can horse around with the join weight values and try and tell Stonefield Query what path to use by using different values, but that kind of got to be a bit of a black art. Join trees now allows you to say, to get from A to D, I want you to go from here to here and here to here, and that's it. No other paths to use. I don't have any, so that's why this list is empty. But if I did, this would show a list of them. Another one here is custom settings. This allows you to define your own custom settings in addition to the ones that we have in the configuration tab here that I'll get to in a moment. This allows you to create your own custom settings and store them in the project files, and then your application plugins might, for example, retrieve some of these settings and do something with them. Again, I don't have any, so that's why this list is empty. In configuration, there are fewer choices than there were before, mostly because a lot of things that we have in our desktop version don't really apply in the web version, and so we've stripped those out. We've also made it clarify the distinction a little bit. We've got a brand new category here called branding. So all of the things in branding are branding related, such as the company name, the website, email addresses, and so on. So the application choices there's a lot fewer of them because all the branding ones were moved over. There's also one that's specific for web here. Can the user register on the login page, which we'll talk about in a bit? Can they edit tags and so on? Now, one thing you don't see here is a scripts node, and that's the case because in our old version, you would write code either in Visual Fox Pro, VBScript, JavaScript, C# or .NET. In Studio, you'd write the code right in Studio, and it would get saved in a file, and that file would get executed when reports get run. Because all of the code now is written in one of the .NET languages, such as VB or C# or F# or COBOL if you want it to be, but it has to be one of the .NET languages. We figured it's probably better to work in a full editor like Visual Studio than it would be to work in a little text window like we have in Stonefield Stonefield Query Studio. And so now scripts aren't defined here anymore. Instead, you just write some C# or VB code like you normally would, and put it into a DLL, and that DLL simply gets dropped into a folder. We have a couple of folders. One is for plugins, so you just find the folder named plugins, you drop your DLL in there, and it automatically registers itself with Stonefield Query. The other is with functions. When I talked about the expression builder earlier on, I mentioned you can create your own functions. Those are actually just very simple to write. It's just a static class with static methods, and those are the functions. You compile that to a DLL, you drop it into the functions folder, that automatically gets registered with Stonefield Query, and those functions are available to be used not just as the output expression of a calculated field, but anywhere you want to use it in Stonefield Query. Again, similar in concept to our desktop version, but just the way it executes is a little bit different. A couple of other differences here, a couple of the new things. One is that there's a publish project function. So because we're not going to create a setup.exe like we did with our desktop version, that you'd install on the customer's machine, instead you're going to publish your project. When you choose this, your choices are you can either upload it to an FTP site or put it into a folder on this particular machine. That would presumably be a virtual directory, assuming that you're running this, say, on a production web server. More than likely, you'll probably use the FTP site publishing to upload it to some website where you want the Stonefield Query to run from. A couple other choices here. We have always had very good multilingual support in Stonefield Query. You can very easily create a localized version of Query just by translating some strings. One thing that we didn't do really well, though, was providing multilingual capabilities for things like field and table captions. We did for all of the messages that Stonefield Query displays to the user, but not for the field and headings and table captions and things like that. You could do it, but it was some work. In the enterprise version, it's actually a lot easier to do that now. And the simplest thing to do is to use this create resource file function. What happens when you choose this is that It goes through the data dictionary and outputs to a resource, which is just an XML file, all of the table captions, field headings, anything else that you might want to translate. You would then take a copy of this XML file and translate it to French or German or whatever, and now all of your column headings in reports would also be translated, not just the messages in the UI, but the report itself gets translated as well, depending on whatever language. If you create it in English, but the user runs it in French, they'll see French headings for the reports. So that's about it. Those are most of the things I was going to show you in Stonefield Query Enterprise Studio. Let me unmute here for a second, and let's see if we have any questions before we go on. Hopefully I killed that feedback.
Yeah.
Any questions?
No.
Doug, is there a clear upgrade path?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Is there a clear upgrade path for, like, I see you have different fields in that config file?
Yeah, great question. I forgot to mention that. Yes, when you go and open a project, let me actually go and do that right now. Let's go and point it at a desktop project. So I'll pick this one here for the Northwind database. Oops, where'd it go? There it is there. When you do that, it recognizes that it's a Stonefield Query desktop project, and so it brings up a dialog asking you if you want to convert it or not. Now, we don't overwrite the existing files. That's why we actually ask you to specify a new folder, and we'll put the data dictionary and everything else into this new folder. Now, the data dictionary files are actually stored in the desktop version. They're stored in a table called repmeta.dbf. In the new version, you can actually define where it's stored. The default is that it's going to be in a SQLite database, which is, a good choice. But if for some reason, if you want the data dictionary to be stored in, say, the same SQL Server database that your application's data is stored in, then just choose Other Database here and choose what kind of data provider you want and the connection string, and then we'll go and create that database, and that's where the data dictionary files will go. But like I said, the default is just a SQLite database. So you click on Convert, and it will actually go and read in all the information from the old data dictionary and put it into the new files. Once you've done that, the other thing you might want to convert are reports and formulas and things like that. So under the File menu is a Convert Reports function. When you choose this, it'll ask you for a folder, and it'll go through all the reports in that folder and the formulas and convert them to the new format for the Stonefield Query Enterprise. Any other questions? No? All right, so let me mute everybody again here. And let's go and take a look at the report designer now. So just like in our desktop version, you can actually launch Stonefield Query Web right from within Studio just by clicking on this button here. So let's go ahead and do that. And let me just move this over here so you can see it. There we go. So here is Stonefield Query Web. Now, by the way, you'll notice this link here. Click here to register if you don't have an account. You'll probably not want this turned on. In fact, it's turned off by default. This is useful if you have a demo version sitting on a website somewhere and you don't want to have people contact you to be able to get a username and password. Instead, you want them to be able to just, register themselves and then have access to it and be able to run reports. That works great for a demo version, maybe not so much for a production version. And so that's actually controlled with a setting in Studio, which I turned on. Like I said, it's turned off by default. That's this one here. Users can register on login page. I set that to true for this sample project. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and log in here. And it goes and loads everything up and displays the Reports Designer. Now, this might look a little bit different than if you've used the Reports Designer on our website in our demo version, or if you've tried it out yourselves. You might notice that there's, some nice blue text here and so on. Let me show you how you change that. Under the Tools menu is an Options function, and here's where you can change a few things. Some of them are similar to what we have in our desktop version, such as display real table and field names, bringing up the report preview in a new window or the same window, and so on. Default template, but we also have a theme. So I've chosen the Cerulean theme. This is the default theme, so this is the one that you would normally see if you run right off our website, which is fine, but I kind of like a little bit more colorful stuff. So we could try Amelia, for example, or we could try put it back to Cerulean, and so on. Some of the other choices here, by the way, are language, so you can choose whether you want to run it in whatever language you've got installed. I've actually got translations for German, French, and Chinese, although not all the Chinese languages in there. And you can also choose locale. The difference between the two is that language is used for language settings, like French or German text. Locale determines what your currency symbol is, your thousand separator, how dates are formatted, things like that. Let's just change for a second over to French, just for grins. And it reopens itself now, and you can see now that all the menu items are in French. So like I said, very easy to have a multilingual version of Stonefield Query where either everybody runs in French or the user gets to decide what language they're gonna work in. So anyway, so this is the Reports Explorer. It shows a list of the reports that have already been created. Let me just collapse some of these things down here. In the web version of Stonefield Query, we no longer have a concept of folders. Instead, we've kind of taken the idea and run with it a little bit, and we now call these things tags. You can very easily say that a report has more than one tag, and so it would fall into more than one group. For example, we'll see here in all reports, I've got a report here called Customer Listing with Embedded Subreport, and it also appears here in Quick Reports. So you can have a report associated with, or have more than one tag for a report. You can create your own tags. Under the Tools menu is a tag editor, and here is where you can create your own set of tags, just like you might create your own set of folders. One thing that's new here, though, is the ability to create or to support dynamic tags. So the idea is that I want to have a tag that is automatically added to a report because the report meets certain conditions, such as it was created in the last 3 days, or it was created by Doug, and so it should automatically have Doug's reports tag associated with it. I won't go into detail. It's described in a lot of detail in the help file. Anyway, so as I said, here is my Reports Explorer. Beside the tag, and these tags are collapsible just by clicking on the tag name or expanding it, beside that name is shown the number of reports that are in that tag. So it's kind of quick and easy way to see how many reports you have. Beside each report is a list of buttons that allow you to edit the report, to preview it, delete it, to change the export options, such as what kind of file to output to, what the email settings are, and so on, and to copy the report. When you hover your mouse over the report name, an information window pops up showing you when it was created and by whom, when it was last modified and by whom, and any comments that were entered about this particular report, and also what report tag it belongs to. The icon indicates the type of report. This is a quick report. If we look at say, labels, this is a different icon that's used, and crosstabs have a different icon, and so on. If you want to run a report, you simply click on the report name, and it actually goes and previews that report, and here's my results. Now, speaking of preview, here are the options in the preview window. You can print the whole report or just the current page. You can go to the first, last, next, previous pages, or jump to a particular page number. You can output the report as various kinds of files, PDF, an Excel file, the XLS format, as well as the XLSX format. We don't have Word listed, but there's RTF, which Word can open, so there's no reason to have both. MHT is basically an HTML file, but with things like images taken care of. Flat text files, comma limited files, and then the 5 kinds of images that we had in the other version as well. You can either do that in the same window, open it up in a new window, or you can actually email the report to somebody just by clicking on this @ sign here. So one of the features that was very popular in our desktop version that we continue to support in our web version is drill downs. This report, for example, shows a list of company names, contact information, and so on. If I click on the company name, that actually drills down and shows me orders to that customer. Now, a couple of differences, though, between this, the web version and the desktop version is that one is that in the desktop version, we only support what we're now calling drill through. When you click on the link, it opens the subreport in a new window or a different tab in the same window, but not within the same report. Whereas now you can see here that this is what we now call a drill down. Drill down means that I drill down right within this report as opposed to drill through, which we still do support, or embedded, which means that it's always shown. You don't have to click anything. This subreport is always shown. The other thing that's new is that we now do support true subreports. In our desktop version, we support linking one report to another, which is kind of similar, but this supports true subreports, which allows you to do, have side-by-side charts and data, or two charts side by side, or whatever you can do in the report designer, you can have as a subreport. A couple other things this report shows. This shows some example of formatted text. So you can see that there is some red and bigger text and italics and bold and so on. Another thing is that you can see that we've got the contact title and the contact name and the title shown above each other. So the title appears below the contact name. In our desktop version, you'd have to use the advanced report designer to do that by moving one field below another. In the desktop version, I'll show you in a moment, or in the web version, I'll show you in a couple minutes that you can actually do it very easily within the quick report wizard just by saying you want this field to go down below another one. All right, let me unmute everybody and see if there are any questions so far. Any questions? Any questions?
Doug, on the localization, I got a quick question. The date format, U.S. and Canada.
Oops, hang on a second. Let me, sorry, try that again?
The date format.
Yes.
Is there a setting for that, running on the same system, U.S. and Canada?
It's the date format is tied to whatever the user's date format is set to. So if they've got it set to on their system, the default would be, on my machine, I've got it set to month, day, year. Somebody else might have it set to day, month, year, or year, month, day, whatever. So it will respect their Windows settings. But under the tools options, you could also change the locale and say that, okay, well, even though I'm running here in North America, I want to use a German locale, so dates would be shown the way they would be shown in Germany.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? No? All right. So let's go and show you what it's like to create a brand new report. So I'm going to go up to the New menu and choose Quick Report. And our Quick Report wizard comes up. I'm going to give it a name. We'll call this my first webinar report. Put in any kind of comments. And tags, you just click on the box here and it shows you a drop-down list of the tags you've already defined. So you can pick whichever tags you want them to go into, or you can delete them. You can have as many tags as you want to. The next step is similar to what we have in our desktop version, which is where you choose the data. So you pick the table that you want to choose fields from, and of course we're seeing descriptive names for tables and fields, not the real table and field names, although you can display that if you want to by turning on display real table and field names. Let's go and grab a couple of fields here. Let's go and grab, say, the company name. So beside each of the fields, you see a button that will display the values for that field and a plus sign which would add it over to the selected side. One new feature in our web version that we don't have in our desktop version is that you can add the same field more than once. You might not want to do that, but you'll notice that when I added company name to the selected side, it didn't remove it from the available side, which our desktop version does. The main reason for that is because, let's say you've got a date field and you want to show the actual date, but you also want to show the date as a month and group on that field. To do that in the desktop version, you'd have to create a formula on that date field and add the date and then the formula. In the web version, you simply add the date field twice and format one of them to show the month and year instead of the date. Now let's go to our orders table, and let's go and grab, say, the order. Speaking of date, let's grab the order date, the order ID, and say the freight amount. Let's go to field properties. In our desktop version, you click a field, then choose field properties to see the properties for that field. In the web version, it's showing you the properties for all fields. You just click on a particular field to change whatever you want to. One nice benefit of that is if you want to change something about several fields, you just go and shift-click on multiple fields, and then, for example, change the font for all of them in one shot rather than having to do them one at a time. Anyway, similar properties that we have in our desktop version, the column heading, which you can spread over 2 lines by pressing enter wherever you want the break to occur, whether the field appears in the report or not, whether the columns are auto-fit or not, and if not, what the width should be, suppress repeating values, the alignment, whether you want to use the default format or if not, what the format should be. So, for example, for a numeric field, you can choose one of these predefined choices currency with 2 decimal places, 1,000 separator, and so on, or just use the default format. Because my freight field is defined in the data dictionary as the default summary type is set to sum, that we're going to set this to sum automatically, whether we want to see a percentage of total or not. One thing that's new here, though, is the control type. The default is a label, meaning it's just going to output the value of the text of that field. The other choices, though, are barcode. If you choose barcode, then this will output one of about a bazillion different types of, well, maybe not quite, one of a lot of different types of barcodes, including, for example, QR codes or the US Postnet codes. You can also indicate whether the text is shown on the barcode and what the size of the barcode should be. Again, that's something that we don't support in our desktop version. You can do barcodes, but you have to do it by using a barcode font. This is all built in now in the web version. Checkbox would be used, for example, for a Boolean field. Rather than showing a Y or an N, it'll show a box, either checked or unchecked, for true or false values. Image will display an image. Rich text would display either HTML or rich text format. And zip code uses a kind of a funny-looking image where it uses sort of a computer-looking, blocky-looking numbers, which is used for zip codes. The style page, we have font and color, both foreground and background. We also support conditional fonts like we do in our desktop version. So, for example, if the number is less than 50, you want it to be black, and if it's greater than 50, you want it to be bold and italics, for example. And on the link page, we have the ability to do drill down reports, again, just like we do in our desktop version. The choices here are email, meaning if the user clicks on the field, it'll pop up their email client. URL means it'll pop up their browser and navigate to whatever field it's supposed to, whatever the URL is supposed to. And a report is how you do your drill downs. So you pick the report you want to drill down to. You pick whether it is a drill down, embedded, or drill through. So drill down means on the same report. Drill through means opening it in a different window, and embedded means it's on the same report, but it's always open, so you don't have to click anything to link it. Let's just choose OK here. And one other thing you can do, if you go to field layout, this is where I mentioned earlier, if you want to rearrange the fields, you can simply go here and have this field appear below that one simply by dragging and dropping that field, so you can control exactly how those fields are laid out. Anyway, let's see what this report's going to look like. Let's hit preview. And here's my results. So you can see here's the company name, order date, order ID, and freight. And if we look at the last page of the report, there'll be a sum on the freight because it's supposed to be a sum field. A few other controls that we have here. You can indicate that the fields should be shown alphabetically by name or in the order they appear in the database. Again, similar to what we have in our desktop version. And you also have the ability to create new formulas. We'll talk about formulas in a little bit. But again, similar to our desktop version, you can create new formulas right here within step 2 of the wizard. All right, let's go to step 3. One change you'll notice is that in the desktop version, grouping is done in the field properties dialog, and sorting is done in step 4. We've consolidated those two things and put them in their own step, which actually appears in step 3 because it's kind of related to, well, actually directly related to field layout. And so that's why we moved it, earlier in the set of steps. Filtering now comes in step 4. So the way that you group a field is simply by dragging and dropping. So if we take the company name and drag it and drop it to the group fields area, that is now a group field. You can also sort fields. So if we, within the company name, we want to have it sorted by order date, we simply drag and drop that to sorted fields. So if I preview it now it's coming out alphabetically by company, grouped by company, and we're seeing subtotals of freight for each company, and at the end of the report we have a grand total. Now, one feature that we don't support in our desktop version is the ability to do group sorts. The idea is that I want to sort on this total, not these individual amounts here. I want to sort on the group totals and have maybe my biggest customers come first. So that's what we call a group sort. So we can group sort on the freight field by simply dragging and dropping it to there, and then having indicating what type of summarization to do, and whether it should be in ascending or descending order. Let's choose descending order and preview it. And now you see the report is not in alphabetical order. Now it's coming out with the biggest subtotal of freight first, the next biggest second, and so on. Again, nice feature that we didn't support in our desktop version. You also have additional properties for group fields. When you click on the group field, you can indicate whether you want to see a count in the group footer, whether the group should start on its own page or on a new page, bookmarks, and so on. So again, similar features to what we have in our desktop version. One new feature, though, here is under Group Starts On. Start on a new page if it won't fit on the current page. What this does is it sort of does widow control for groups. If it can't fit the entire group on the rest of the page, it moves the entire group up to the next page, and that way you don't have groups split across pages. Any questions about anything so far? No questions? Okay. Then let's go on to the next step, which is filtering. Let's go and add a filter condition. And we'll say, for example, do it for a certain date range. So we'll choose order date. Same set of operators we had before, equals, does not equal, and so on. I'll choose is between. For date fields, you can choose to use the date only, or you can turn this off and see the date and time. We have a calendar, and sort of a more modern looking calendar than we have in our older versions. For example, let's go to January 1st. For the starting date, and let's go to December 31st for our ending date. One thing that is new is the ability to display values for dates. We didn't have that ability in the desktop version because there was a drop-down calendar. That was the only way to enter dates, whereas now you can display values for it. We have Ask at Runtime, same as we had before. Let's turn this on, for example. You can compare a date to a value or an expression or a database expression. Again, similar to what we have in our desktop version. The nice thing about expressions is you can use an expression such as, for example, go month, date, comma, 3. So this would be 3 months in the future to go month, date, comma, 7. So this would take today's date, add 3 months to it for the first one, and 7 months to it for the second one. One thing that's new, though, when I preview this, you notice about Ask at Runtime turned on. In our desktop version, if you choose an expression, then Ask at Runtime automatically gets turned off and hidden, so you can't have an Ask at Runtime and an expression, whereas in our web version you can. So if I preview this now, it'll calculate these things and we'll see those results, but I can actually change them if I want to. I can change the expressions here because of the Ask at Runtime condition. So when I go and run it, now you can see that it's evaluated those two dates and it's showing me 3 months and 7 months into the future. But I did have the ability to change the Ask at Runtime. One other thing that's new in our desktop version is to give it a custom description. For example, if you have, like customer status equals active, you could display that instead as active customers. So we'll, for example, call this sales in 2014, for example. So then rather than displaying order date is between, it displays sales in 2014 instead. Any questions about filtering?
Can you back up a second? I have a question about the grouping.
Yes, go ahead. Let's go back to grouping.
You mentioned the page length and the not the widow there on that one option.
Right.
Well, because you're in a browser, rendering into a browser, what determines the page length?
It's still set by the size of the paper that you've chosen in. We'll get to when we get to step 5, when we get to report settings or layout settings. You'll see that we still choose a paper size because the idea is that you might end up printing it. You might end up sending it to a PDF, in which case pagination is important. You're right. Normally, if I'm just previewing it, pagination kind of isn't that big of a deal. But I might print it, or I might upload to a PDF or a PNG or something else, or RTF, where pagination is important.
Is there any way to say, okay, rendering to the browser, I get one length, and output, I get a different length?
Let me make a note. We don't currently have that, but let me make a note about that.
Or your infinite report. Like if you're on some of these web pages, they'll just keep scrolling down and keep rendering data.
Right. Yeah. So we'll take a look at that. Right now, reports are paginated, but we can take a look at that as an option, as being able to specify that you want the infinite report, for example. Any other questions? No. All right. Then let's go to the next option here, which is report options. So you can put in a report title. Orientation, we have the same mechanism we have here as we do in our desktop version. Automatic, portrait, landscape. You can choose your template, and we do provide a template editor. So again, same as our desktop version, you can go and choose which template you want to. One thing these controls here are new though. In our desktop version, whatever template you use, that's the paper type that gets used for that report. So if you've chosen a template that looks nice but is letter size and you want to do legal size, you'd have to clone that template and change the paper setting to legal, and then use that template instead. Whereas now you can override the template paper type and say, no, I don't want to use letter. I want this. I like the look of it, but I want it to be A4, for example. And the same thing with the margins. You can change top, bottom, left, and right margins. In our desktop version, we just have a left margin setting. Respect page width is used to determine whether you want to have Stonefield Query automatically horizontally paginate the report rather than splitting the fields over 2 or more rows. Something that our desktop version only does. It only if you have so many fields that they can't all fit across the page, it'll automatically move them down to the next row. With this respect page width, you can make it horizontally paginate them, or you can auto fit them. If I turn this off, then I can auto fit the page, which means it automatically bumps the font down so that it will put them all on one row, similar to a feature that we do have in our desktop version. We have the ability to indicate where the group total should go, either after the values or before the values, in other words, in the group header or group footer. You can run a report with no records, again, same as our desktop version. Summary reports, same as our desktop version. If we preview this report, for example, now again, we'll see it shown in reverse order by freight, by the total of the freight, rather than alphabetical order. Distinct records and retrieve only top-end records. This is there in our desktop version, but you did have to click on the Advanced button in Step 2 to be able to see these things, whereas now they're actually displayed right here in Step 5. There is an Advanced Report Properties dialog, though. If we click on this, this allows you to choose, for example, exclusion information. You can customize your joins. So if you want to do a left or a right outer join, you can do that here, again, with nice description expression without saying inner and outer join. You could customize the SQL statement that's used for the report, and you can put in after data and before data or after run scripts in here. The last step is security, and again, this is similar to our desktop version. By default, everyone has access to this role, but with drag and drop, I can take this and take everyone out of there and put managers in, for example, so only have managers have access to it. And I can indicate what type of access they have, whether it's read-only access or whether it's full access, which means that they can modify or delete the report, not just run it. I'll go and put everyone back in that list, and we'll give everyone full rights. All right, so that is it for my report. Any questions about anything I've shown you so far, especially when it comes to creating your new report? Oh, there was a question here, sorry. Do you support multiple level drill downs? The answer there is yes. You can drill down as many levels as you want to. You can have a drill down instead of a drill down instead of a drill down. We support that in our desktop version as well, and it's also supported in our web version. Any other questions? No? Okay, then let us carry on. Let me save this report. I'll click on Finish. And my report is now saved. I saved it in the webinar reports folder, and so here it is here, my first webinar report. So I can preview it. I can output to file. I can do whatever I want to with that particular report. Let's go and take a look at crosstab reports. We'll just go through this fairly quickly. So we'll call this my crosstab report, and we'll go and add some fields to it. Like, let's say, for example, we'll go and grab the country from customers. We'll go and grab the category name from products, and we'll go and grab the total price or our sales amount. Step 3, like in our desktop version, step 3 is where you indicate what goes where by dragging and dropping. So put the country in the rows, category in the columns, and total price in the data area. And when I click on the total price field, then I have some options such as what summary type to do, whether I show percentage or total or not, change percent, show change amount. One thing that is new here is you can sort on this field. Let's preview the report first and see what it looks like. So here's my crosstab report showing sales by country and by product. We've got grand totals, we got row totals, and we have column totals on the next page, or column totals and row totals on the next page. But you notice it's shown alphabetically by country because we didn't tell it otherwise. However, I can go here and sort on this field either in ascending or descending order. When we do that and preview the report, now it's coming out with the biggest sales first. So that's why USA comes first and Germany second and Austria third, because that is the order in which the sales are. So again, that's a feature that we didn't have or don't have in our desktop version. The rest of the steps are the same as they are for quick reports. So we have filtering, we have layout, although a difference here is between this and quick reports is that you can indicate whether column and row totals are shown or not, whether column and row grand totals are shown or not, and where the values go, if they come before the, where the totals come before values or after the values. One other thing I should mention, by the way, in step 3, one new feature that we don't support in our desktop version is the ability to have multiple column fields. We do support multiple row fields and data fields, just like we do in our desktop version, but we also support multiple column fields now, which our desktop version doesn't support. And the last step is security, same as before. Any questions? That was kind of a quick run through. Any questions about crosstab reports?
Crosstab reports.
No questions? Oh, there was a question here from Steve. We have the need to output government forms which have a fair amount of pre-printed text plus values from the database, typically 1 record per page. Is that a reasonable application? Yes. Now, the one thing that you need to do, though, is you need to use the Advanced Report Designer, which I'm not going to have time to go over in this webinar, but we do have an Advanced Report Designer that you can use and draw boxes and lines and precisely position fields, down to the 100th of an inch, and so on. And so you can do that kind of thing using the Advanced Report Designer, and then just run it from within here. The layout, you can't do that kind of thing on the layout in the wizard, but you can in the Advanced Report Designer. Any other questions? No? Okay. Let's take a real quick look at labels. So again, I'll just give it some report name here. Actually, you don't even have to enter a name. If you're not going to bother saving it, the name's actually not even important at all. And let's just go and grab a few things here. We'll grab company name, contact name, address, say city, and we'll grab the postal code. But maybe I want the postal code to be formatted as a barcode. So let's go to here, and on the style page, on the format page, we'll set this to a barcode, and maybe we'll use, for example, the postnet code. So now when I preview this report, now we get a labels and with the postnet code. And just like in our desktop version, you can control the format for those labels in step 5. Step 3 was grouping and sorting. Step 4 is filtering. Step 5 is formatting. And here we have not only all the Avery numbers like we do in our desktop version, we've got lots of other kinds of labels as well. We've got APLI and Aero and Herma, and I'm assuming that lots of these are international label formats. But anyway, they're all there as well. Now, one thing that's also new in our web version is that once you've chosen the label style, you can actually tweak it. We show the label dimensions here, but if you want to change that for some reason, maybe on your particular printer it's got kind of a weird left margin automatically added, then you can go and change, for example, the horizontal pitch that's used or the left margin or things like that. So you can actually tweak the label settings if you need to make them come out exactly the way that you need to on your report. Any questions about labels? Oh, here's a question here. How would end users in a multi-tenant environment access the report designer? That's a great question. We do support multi-tenant environments. So let me talk about that in case you're not familiar with it. The idea of a multi-tenant environment is that, let's say I've got 5 different customers, each of them belonging to, by customer I mean different companies. Each of those companies might have, say, 5 different users. So when Bob from the ABC company logs into Stonefield Query, I don't want them to see records from the other customers. Now, there's a couple ways this might happen. One is that I may have a separate database for each company, in which case the way that I'll deal with that is through my connection string, script my connection string, And when Bob logs in, I check to see what company Bob belongs to, go and grab the connection settings for that company's database, and that's the database that Stonefield Query connects to. The other type of multi-tenant environment, though, is where I have a single database, and maybe I've got, say, some kind of ID value, like a company ID or a customer ID on every record. So I know that this record came from ABC company, and this record came from the XYZ company. And so people who Bob belongs to the ABC company, he should only see ABC company records. So in that case, what would happen is that I would create a plugin that automatically filters every record on customer ID being whatever company Bob belongs to. And they don't even see it in the filter dialog. They don't know it's there. They can't remove it. They can't change it in any way. They don't even know that there's a filter on it. But every time we send a SQL statement to the database engine, there's an additional where clause added, which is company name equals or company ID equals whatever that tenant ID is. Does that answer your question, Urban? Okay, great. All right. Any other questions before we move on? No? All right. So just a few more things I want to show you here. Oops, let's just cancel out of this one. In our next release, we're gonna have chart reports and dashboards. We don't have them in version 1.0 just because we wanted to get it done, get it out the door rather than taking the time to build those things. But those are on our plate. We're actually started working on those things already for our next release. You can schedule a report though, so let's go and do that. You give it a schedule name. You specify whether there's a starting date and an ending date or not. How often the schedules run, whether it's weekly, monthly, or yearly, and if it's monthly, for example, whether it's on the third Wednesday of the month or the second day, and in what months. So you set your schedule settings here. Then you pick the reports that you want. Now, this is something that is new in our web version, is that you can pick multiple reports. So rather than having to schedule each report individually, if you always want to run this one and this one and this one for the schedule, you can do that. And then you specify for each report what happens to it. I want this report to be emailed to this person. This one report should be sent as a PDF to that person. This one should be an Excel file sent to somebody else, and so on. And so each of those reports potentially could be sent to a different recipient, or they could all go to the same person, whichever, whatever those settings need to be. And you can specify where it gets sent to, who the recipients, the BCC recipients, the file type, other settings, keywords, titles, and so on, things like that. I don't have any schedules, so once you close the scheduler, it takes you to the scheduler page where you can either run a schedule, or you can edit a schedule, run it now if you need to, edit a schedule, remove it, and so on. A few things let's go back to the home page here. A few of the things under the Tools menu, we talked about Tag Editor. Under Options, in addition to some of the things we talked about before, there's also, you can put in your email settings, and you can put in scheduler settings so that it knows how to use those two things. There's also formulas. So the idea of a formula is same as our desktop version. You can create a formula such as unit price times quantity and call it total price, so the user can go and pick that on a report. This shows a list of the formulas I've already created. One nice new feature is it shows you how many reports there are that use it, and when you hover over this, it'll show you a list of those reports. So if you're tempted to delete this formula thinking it's not being used, you can actually see that it is being used and which reports would be impacted if you decided to delete it. When we go and create a new formula, similar to our desktop version, you give it some kind of caption. Such as, we'll call this one 2016 sales, for example. You can give it some comments. You can give it a column heading. You can indicate whether Stonefield Query evaluates the expression or whether it's sent to the database engine for evaluation. Again, similar to our desktop version. You put in some kind of expression like unit price times quantity or whatever it is you want to, using the field picker down here. So, for example, let's go back one step. Let's go back to the formula step here, and let's choose, for example, go to our order entry, order details table, and then we could pick, for example, our unit price times quantity. You can also use functions. So we've got that same set of functions we saw in Stonefield Query Studio are available. So there's things like ceiling and day and floor and first of month and iCase and IF and so on, plus any of your custom functions. So get CSZ, get current date time, get tax rate. Those were custom functions that I wrote just in tiny little C functions, static functions, and drop the DLL into the functions folder. Now they're available to use here as well. There's a preview button you can click on to go ahead and preview the formula to make sure that it looks correct. One thing that's new, though, is the ability to create what we call a grouping formula. Grouping formula is kind of a cool concept. In fact, it's so cool that we're actually adding it to our desktop version this summer. I'm working on it right now, in fact, and so it'll be a new feature available this summer in our desktop version. It's actually a really cool feature. The idea is that when you turn on grouping formula, you're basically creating what amounts to a little mini SQL statement. Because if you think about it, this is kind of like the from clause. This is the list of fields to select. And on the grouping tab, you can also enter filter condition and grouping fields. So the purpose for a grouping formula is, let's say, for example, I want to show a list of customers and their 2016 sales. So in order to do that, I would, I go and grab the company name, I go to my sales table, and I grab the sale amount field, and then I'd filter the report on, sales date is between the first of the year and the end of the year. The problem is that would show only customers who had sales in this year. What if I also wanted to have another column beside it, which was last year's sales? Now I can't really do a filter because I want to show both last year's and this year's sales. And how does it know that the first column should be this year's sales and the second column should be last year's sales? With a grouping formula, you can do that. So what we would do here with this particular one, for example, I've called this one 2016 sales. I've got my expression of unit price times quantity. On the grouping page, I'd put in a filter condition of saying orders, order date, is between, and then I'd fill in the first of the year to the end of the year, and then I would also indicate that I want to group that on my order details or on my customer ID. So the idea then is that this thing almost is like a little mini SQL select statement. Go and calculate the total price from the order details table, joining to orders table because we have a filter on order, and joining to the customer table to do the grouping on that customer ID. And now, beside each customer name, I would have one number, which would be their 2016 sales. And I could have another formula, which gives me 2015 sales. Or I could make it more generic and call them this year and last year. And by using expressions in the filter conditions rather than hard-coded values, I could specify that I want this year's sales and last year's sales as two different formulas, two different columns on the report. So this is a really cool new feature. It allows you to do comparison reports, showing sales from one year to the next or from one category to the next in different columns really easily. To do that in our desktop version right now, you'd have to create formulas using if clauses, and they get really complicated, and it's kind of a mess. So that's going to be a nice addition to our desktop version as well. Any questions about, oh, sorry, there was a question here. The question was, is a schedule report saved in the server's task scheduler like the desktop version? And the answer is yes, it is saved in the server's task scheduler, but it's also stored as an XML file, similar to our desktop version, but this file can be edited. You don't see the file, but when you go into the scheduler function here, you can go and edit those schedules. And you're basically editing the schedule in the Windows Task Scheduler and in that XML file as well. Another question was, do you have support for PostgreSQL? And the answer is yes. We support any database engine that has an ODBC driver, an OLADB provider, a .NET provider, or an API of some kind. For example, you could query against Excel files or MySQL or flat text files or any database at all. Any questions about formulas or anything else for that matter?
Formulas or anything else.
Any questions? No? All right, so just a couple more things and then we'll wind it up. In the security tab, this is like the maintain users and groups functions in our desktop version. You can define what users can log into Stonefield Query, what type of license they get, whether it's a report designer or a report viewer. Whether they're active or not, this is something new. You can deactivate a user so they can't log in, and then later on reactivate them. In our desktop version, you have to actually remove the user and then re-add them again. And in roles, you can specify, for example, what roles are available. So you can create your own set of roles. You can specify what data groups are available to those roles. You can specify whether they have access to the scheduler, the tag editor. We're going to add other things here as well, actually, and even what reports they can access. Change password allows the user to change their password. Import and export report are similar to the functions that we have in our desktop version. Be able to upload an SFX file, which is the XML file format that we use for reports, or export that SFX file format as well. There's a setup wizard that allows you to go and specify licenses, ODBC settings, if you've got that option turned on, for example. And for administrators only, you can also download the application log. This is similar to the diagnostic.txt that you may have seen in our desktop version, and that allows you to, or us, to go through and see what kind of issues have come up. A question came up was, what can users with a report viewer licenses do? Report viewer licenses cannot create reports. They can only run reports. If there's an ask at runtime filter condition or not, they can put in the values for those. They can output to PDF or Excel or whatever, but they can't copy reports, and they can't create new reports. They can schedule them and run them, but they cannot create new reports. Under the help menu is a help topics function. And this is sort of a full online help. This is customizable, though. Here it says Stonefield Query Enterprise Web and shows the Stonefield Query logo, and in lots of places it says Stonefield Query. Just like in our desktop version, you can customize that. If we switch back to Studio for a second, when you click on this button in the toolbar here, this generates a customized branded help file. So it uses all of the settings in the branding tab here, the application name, your company name, your email address, your website, your Twitter URL, your Facebook URL, and so on. All of those things are customized in the help file, so it would be a branded version of Stonefield Query, including the help. Also under the help menu is access to our technical support forum. You can create support tickets. Again, this would be brandable as well. And there's also an about dialog where it shows you the version number and the license number and so on. All right, so that was all of the things I was going to show you in the Stonefield Query web. Any questions or anything else you'd like to see before we wind up? I'm sorry. Was that what question? What was that question again? I'm sorry, I really couldn't hear you very well. Can you try and repeat that?
Yeah, disregard.
Oh, okay. Any other questions? No? Well, thank you everybody very much for attending this webinar. If you do have any questions, if you go to stonefieldquery.com, under the support menu is a support ticket function. So you can create a support ticket. Be sure to choose Stonefield Query Enterprise as the product name, and ask whatever question you have there. We'd be happy to answer them right away. I look forward to working with you all as you go through Stonefield Query. Oh, there is one more question here. It says, can you assign reports to one tenant in a multi-tenant environment? The answer for that is yes. You can indicate that, for example, only either you can do it on by role-based security. So you can say, for example, if Bob doesn't have rights to this report, then Bob can't see it. But you can also do it on a tenant-by-tenant basis. So tenants can only see the reports that were created by somebody who belongs to that tenant. And I think we actually have an example of that in our help file. In one of the plug-in discussions. All right, any other questions before we wind up? No? Well, thank you very much. Like I said, if you do have any other questions, feel free to submit a support ticket. We'll be happy to answer them all. Have fun playing with it, and we'll see you all later. Bye.